Tonight, we are very honored to have Jean Ponzi from Missouri Botanical Gardens. She's been very prominent in the environmental scene in St. Louis for quite a while.
Longer than you've been alive.
And I've been wanting to have her grace us with her presence, and I'm glad it's happening tonight. So please welcome Jean Ponzi.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. While Dirk is changing over the computers, there are 4 handouts on the round table immediately behind you. There is a card for the 12th annual Green Homes and Great Health Festival, which is the biggest annual event of the Earthways Center of the Missouri Botanical Garden, which is the sustainability division of the garden where I work. It's on Saturday, September 28th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the garden. And we bring together about 100 of the region's experts in all things green, living green, solar power, geothermal energy, green building, green remodeling, cleaning, home maintenance, planting, chickens, bees, all kinds of other things having to do with, sneak preview, we got a little ahead of ourselves there. We have a new DIY section coming up. We paint an eco mural on a metro bus every year. We have activities for kids. It's free with regular garden admission, or for St. Louis City County residents, free until noon because of our grateful status as a part of the Zoo Museum Tax District. So I hope you will plan to come to that and check it out. We also have a partnership with Barnes Jewish Hospital, Slightly Cancer Center, and Washington University Physicians that brings together a health segment, including free health screenings, the opportunity to talk one-on-one with health experts. We have a local food court, we have live music. It's really a great day at the garden. Also on the table, because you are St. Louis County residents, you could consider taking advantage of the St. Louis County Saves program, which is a low-interest loan program supporting renovations, energy efficiency, etc., but you can now incorporate solar installations into a low-interest loan program supporting home upgrades for middle-class homeowners. A lot of these kinds of programs will target low-income weatherization, and St. Louis County Saves is especially for middle-class homeowners. It is not an arduous application process, and all the information is available online at stlouiscountysaves.com. The Earthways Center is a promotional partner of this program, and we've been working with contractors, we've been working with homeowners. We also work a lot with Ameren, as well as Complete Gas, but tonight the flyer is here from Ameren's Act On Energy program, which is a package of energy efficiency incentives that Ameren rolled out at the beginning of this year. The most recent one on the little flyer there is called Cool Savers, which offers a $75 rebate for tuning up your air conditioning system, whether that is a central air system or an existing room air conditioner system. A lot of incentives like this typically will target when you're ready to install a new one, and there is one to help offset the cost of that kind of installation, but this is an energy efficiency tune-up. So I hope you'll take those flyers as well if you're interested in energy efficiency, which anybody green should be. And last but not least, the garden's general information graph card, which has our website, it has our hours, it has basic information and a sticker on the front with contact information for the Green Resources Answer Service. How many of you are gardeners? How many of you have used the garden's horticulture answer service or plant doctor service over the years? Well, we now have the plant doctor, and you're looking at it. And that is a dedicated answer service by email or by phone. We will take questions at any time, and I say we because even though I'm the primary point person there, I'm leveraging all the expertise of the Earthways team as well as our pretty prodigious research skills. So we'll take questions at any time like, what's green about this? Where do I get it? Where do I get rid of it responsibly? Is that really true, or is it greenwashing, like whitewash, hogwash, brainwash, unsubstantiated green claims? We have a lot of information at our fingertips, and from time to time get to really dig in and do some research in response to one of our green resources inquiries, which helps us build our knowledge base. So I hope we'll take that part and use that as well. Tonight, my topic is biodiversity, which is a new topic in the range of talks like this that Earthways staff gives in public settings, in workplaces. It is a new initiative. BiodiverseCity St. Louis is an initiative that Missouri Botanical Garden launched publicly earlier this year as the first step out of about 2 years worth of work internally at the behest of our president, Dr. Peter Wise-Jackson, to really rally public awareness and participation around the topic of biodiversity, which even for us in the Earthways Center, who like live and breathe this green stuff all the time, it's like, what are we supposed to talk, how are we talking about this? The variety of all life on Earth. Let's just get our minds around a subject here that has plenty of opportunity to communicate. All of the interactions among all species and between species and their environment, summed up in one term, biodiversity. And it is as you will see in this presentation here, it dovetails with other kinds of sustainability concerns, it goes above and beyond that, and it has been, frankly, very challenging and very rewarding for our internal team to discuss, to conceptualize, to coalesce into some actual programming. So basically, biodiversity covers all, which is
the middle, the round button.
the big one. All of the species of life on Earth. Everything, including us, of course. All of the genetic diversity within all of those species. The ecosystems, the communities in which species are grouped in a particular place. Ecology, ecologos, has to do with place and looking at living communities in place. It includes all of the non-living factors affecting species and ecosystems, such as soil health, minerals, climate factors. It covers the essential needs of all living things and also the services that these other living communities provide to each other and to us: food, shelter, medicines, economies, etc. So in short, biodiversity is pretty much the whole 9 yards on our planet. And then this diagram is a linear way of looking at all of these factors, separated out into variety, for example. It gets a little hard to read some of the small types. When you talk about biodiversity from a scientific standpoint, there is scientific nomenclature that describes species and describes the relationships of species to one another. In the plant world, you have the plant kingdom, first of all. You have plant families. Within families, you have genuses of plants. And within the genuses, you have species of plants. And within the species, you have variety of plants that are, many of which are cultivated and bred by humans for various purposes that range from decorative and enjoyable all the way up to life-supporting and very practical. You have biodiversity as the basis of agriculture, fishing, forestry, the development of medicines. You have the living factors, plants and animals, of course, the two major kingdoms, but then you also have microorganisms, and you get down to the non-living factors, and this is where I kind of have to take issue with this slide. Soil as a non-living factor. In the course of my work on this topic, and in the course of being a weekly radio talk show host, my radio show Earthworms on KDHX, Monday nights from 7 to 8 on KDHX, gives me the chance to talk about a variety, have conversations about environmental topics that I would never have the intestinal fortitude, let alone the time, to deal with if I didn't do a radio show once a week. So one of my guests recently is the author of an environmental journalist named Joanna Schwartz. She has written a book called Cows Save the Planet, which is a cute title over the subject matter of soil as the basis for the health of all life, including climate. and restoring the balance of climate on the planet through attention to soil. So in reading this and having this conversation with this woman on the radio, one of the things that I run across is 97% of the biodiversity on Earth is contained in soil. We're talking a lot of bacteria there and a lot of different kinds of organisms, most of which have not yet been identified, but because we can identify organisms and study organisms on the basis of their DNA now, very recently, identification and understanding of soil biodiversity has really dug a level deeper. And this is not the first pun that I will use in this talk. So when you talk about soil as a non-living factor, not necessarily. There's a lot of overlap between these things. And when I think about soil microorganisms, that has really gotten my attention and my imagination fired up. And it's a funny duality because on the one hand it's like, holy cats, what's going on in there? And then on the other hand it's like, well, it's brown. And I feel like people must have felt before about the ocean and about life in the ocean before the undersea world of Jacques-Yves Cousteau took us under there with television cameras, and I'm totally dating myself with that reference there. But there is a lot to be learned about life on Earth and about the relationships about life on Earth, and no lack of importance for pursuing that. So this little linear diagram here can also be understood sort of from above, looking at it in a more spherical manner, in a more overlapping manner about local and national and global benefits. And when you talk about national, you're really talking about things like economic factors. You're talking about supply of vital product streams. You're talking about the water quality and water quantity that is more specific to a geographic grouping that you would call a nation. You're also talking about the oversight of responding to national hazards, which sometimes does have an international scope, but more often than not, it's like the U.S. National Guard goes in, or the U.S. wildfire fighting group goes in to respond to those kinds of things. All of these elements, from the dispersal of seeds to the regulation and the balance of climate, which is the overarching conglomerate of weather patterns, the bigger picture of weather patterns, all of that relates to biodiversity. And I'm going to tell you some of those specific relationships as we go on. The availability and the discovery of biochemicals that lead to pharmaceutical development in the tropics of the planet Earth alone, the undiscovered number of species and the unidentified number of especially plant species, but also animal species in the tropics, which are still subject to deforestation to do things like graze cattle to produce cheap hamburger, that is a issue in biodiversity, because if we don't know what the plants are, we don't know what their medicinal capabilities are. We don't know what their food producing capabilities are. We don't know what the understandings are that come out of living communities that could enhance our ability to replicate those processes in our human enterprises or just participate in them as part of the community of organisms. So biodiversity is a really critical, overarching set of understandings and set of concerns. And when you think about it in a more visual, graphic representation, it's things we eat, it's things we drink, it's things we wear, it's what we live in, it's things that beautify our lives, it's things that uplift us, it's things that connect us to cultural diversity. It's the connective tissue. More so, it's putting a name on the connective tissue of the environment in a way that allows us to look at the environment in patterns, in groupings, in interactions, in a much more intelligent and engaging way than even just the term environment has offered us the opportunity to do. In consideration of sustainability, I work primarily in my job, I work right now primarily with businesses. They send a middle-aged, tree-hugging, Birkenstock-wearing, environmentalist feminist into businesses to tell them what to do that's green, and they do it. And I call that progress. And it's also really a wonderful opportunity for me to meet a lot of people, a lot of individuals and groups of people who have their livelihood in businesses, which a lot of people do, who are very concerned about these kinds of things and want to make a difference in their day-to-day lives and in the activities that their businesses are engaged in. So all of that sustainability work going on in businesses where you're talking about energy efficiency, water conservation, waste reduction, transportation alternatives, education, outreach, what does it say in your website, etc. Sustainability, then you put biodiversity on top of that and go, holy cats, what else are we supposed to think about here? Well, because most of all that other stuff, those core principles that many humans are engaging with now, have to go in yet an extra valence out, from personal concern to interacting with other businesses, other communities, vendors, suppliers, to all living systems. And take into account, in our planning, in our budgeting, in the things we do, our impacts on all living systems. This is not beyond the realm of what human beings can do. You know, we turned off our cell phones, we turned off our PDAs. It was not that long ago that you would walk up to a thing on the wall and pick it up and go, hello, and not even have anybody leave a message. We have the capability of dealing with this multiplicity of factors and dealing with it intelligently and efficiently. What we need to do is learn the vocabulary, learn the ropes, and incorporate that into what we're already doing in a way that's manageable for us. Dynamic dimensions, cultivate one, you help cultivate the others. We don't have to bite it off in one giant gulping whole, but we need to do our part in our place, and then contribute to the part of the larger community and the larger political will as part of an informed, engaged citizenry. The global why, okay, species loss. Climate change, yep, that's a big issue, but the loss of biodiversity is perhaps even a bigger issue because loss of biodiversity contributes to climate change. There are balancing factors that come from phenomena under the umbrella of biodiversity that affect climate change. The number of species that are on this slide, okay, 1.9 million total number of described, 11.3 million estimated number of species. We have a way to go yet to fill up the Peterson Guide to Other Living Things on Earth. 1,000 times is the estimated current rate of extinction versus the natural rate of extinction. Species do come and go. They evolve, they come into being, they go out of being. We do not have stegosauruses walking around Metro St. Louis anymore, although we remember them fondly. And they have contributed through the carbon in their bodies to a lot of the mobility and some of the issues that we're dealing with today. However, the extreme ramping up of that extinction rate, that is the problem. And the predicted species loss of 20 to 50% of all species, all biodiversity on Earth over the next 100 years, this is red alert here for human beings. And the challenge for us is to learn about this stuff and incorporate it into what we think about and care about in a way that works for us as a species and for individuals. Concern for biodiversity is the ecological sensibility for the 21st century. Biology is a lifelong learning requirement, and it doesn't mean cutting up frogs. It means getting outside and understanding what's out there. And it also means taking children outside and engaging them with what's out there and how those things work, so that we don't raise generations of young humans that don't care about this stuff because they don't have a relationship with the natural world. That's a totally another subject for another talk. So at a global level, 2010 to 2020 is the United Nations International Decade of Biodiversity. And there are some goals that have been set by organizations, the United Nations, plant conservation organizations. Missouri Botanical Garden is very much a part of that goal setting and that goal achieving in our relationship with other countries, within the scientific community. We are planning to host the every 3 years education conference of Botanic Gardens Conservation International at the Missouri Botanical Garden in 2015. So we will have plant conservation educators from all over the world coming here to St. Louis to learn from each other and to learn from what we are doing. This is a global effort, and it's happening, but boy, it really needs to ramp up and become a priority at a political level, at a citizen will level. The global versus the urban why. Why should we care about this on a global level? Because most of us live in urban or suburban areas, and yet most of the world's biological diversity is found in the tropical and subtropical countries, the parts of the earth that we often refer to as the lungs of the earth. Very concentrated areas of biodiversity relative to the very concentrated areas of human population that we have in urban and suburban areas. Even though cities occupy a fraction, just 2% of the Earth's surface, the inhabitants of cities around the planet use approximately 75% of those resources. So it is incumbent upon us who are making good use of the density of the infrastructure of urban and suburban areas to be aware of the bigger picture of biodiversity. And without healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, biological diversity around the planet, cities' healthy functions are in jeopardy, serious jeopardy, because of that provisioning of things like food, fiber, and fuels, but also because of the interaction of biodiversity factors with purification and detoxification of things like air and water and soil, and mitigating serious effects like droughts and floods. So all of this is related. And then the frosting on the cake is the spiritual, aesthetic, and social factors that enrich our lives as humans through the phenomena associated with biodiversity. This is at the end here of the real wordy slides, and we're working on at the Missouri Botanical Garden on our team. We're working on having these be more graphic and less wordy. So thank you for bearing with all this. There's more pictures coming. On this continuum of benefits to nature on one end and benefits to humans on the other end, you can see that there are a variety of factors that sort of start to cross, they sort of start to overlap. When you are aware of biodiversity, you, for example, create corridors for natural populations to move and to live safely and to thrive. My bedtime reading the other night was a report from the organization Pollinator Partners about different types of pollinators. I was also watching Perry Mason on MeTV at the same time. I was kind of multitasking. But pollinators need corridors through which to move to find their sources of pollen and nectar. And pollinators, how many kinds of pollinators can we name in this group? You name them, I'll list them. Pardon? Birds. Birds, okay.
Bats.
Bats. Bees. Pardon?
Butterflies.
Butterflies. Moths.
Wasps.
Pardon?
Wasps.
Wasps, yes.
Syrphids.
Pardon?
Syrphid flies.
Flies, we're just going to group all the flies in a group. Beetles. All of those types of pollinators are responsible, and we're just talking pollinators here, are responsible for carrying that little fuzzy stuff from plant to plant to plant that allows the plants to reproduce and provide us with fuels, fiber, and food, etc. And by the way, there is one type of bat that pollinates all chocolate. Need I say more? Okay, so that's an example of stepping stones or corridors for natural populations. Here's another example. Monarch butterflies. What is the food source and what is the type of plant that is the food and the reproductive support source for monarch butterflies?
Milkweed.
Milkweed, yes, this is a very knowledgeable crowd. Okay, so with habitat loss and the decimation of native plant populations, a lot of nice native plants here around Longview Farms, milkweed populations are scarce enough that monarch butterflies that are migratory insects, they migrate from North America to South America every year, and they do it in a couple of legs and a couple of generations. So you'll have a generation that goes from North America down to Central America, they reproduce and they die. Their offspring migrate down to South America where they reproduce and they die. Their offspring migrate back up to Central America where they reproduce and die, and their offspring migrate back up to North America where they reproduce and die, and the cycle starts all over again. Why do they do this? I do not know. I do not claim to know, but it's what monarchs do. And they need milkweed all along the way in order to reproduce and in order to thrive. So here's an opportunity, knowing that, about one species that is not necessarily a keystone species, you take it out and the pile topples, but it's absolutely a species that engages the delight and the identification and the caring of human beings. And we need those kind of identifier species. So what about a transcontinental effort to repopulate milkweed along those monarch migratory pathways? In the same way that Monarch Watch, which is a citizen science butterfly counting effort, has engaged a lot of humans along those migratory pathways, we could have a milkweed repopulation corridor effort that would address one of these issues, and hopefully in so doing raise awareness of other issues and other biodiversity considerations. That's a multiplier effect, that's a possibility. Now we're going to focus here on providing ecosystem services. Ecosystem services, what does that mean to you?
The air we breathe.
One of the things, bingo. And where do we get it? Who provides it for us?
Trees.
Green plants of all types, yes. What do they need from us that allows them to go through the process of providing us with the oxygen that we need? Carbon dioxide, waste product of our respiratory system. Gosh, there is reciprocity all over the planet if we take the trouble to look at it and understand it and value it. So ecosystem services, purification of air, purification of water, regeneration of soils, removal of waste, all of those kinds of things. In my profession, ecosystem services identifies that kind of stuff. And although for most of the 25 years that I've been talking green, if I were to ask the average group of people, where do you think electricity comes from? What do you think would be the predominant answer? Out of the wall, yes. And water comes from the faucet, and food comes from the grocery store. We are learning as a species that there is more to it than that, but we are sort of relearning that from not that many generations ago, when most of your food supply would come from right in your circle of family and, you know, the village that you lived in or the nearby surrounding countryside. So ecosystem services, the foundation of all local economies. We're going to look at the way in which dollar values, which are essential to human beings placing any other kind of values on these kinds of intangibles, are being defined around one type of population, which is some of my best friends, trees. Now these next two slides are examples of economic-wise, based on the value of trees in the lower Midwest. And this is data that has been compiled in a program called itreetools.org. It's a wonderful online website, and the whole iTree body of information is a joint product of the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the U.S. Forest Service. And it is a very fun website to tool around if you, like me, are a big fan of trees. itreetools.org. So, in calculating these kinds of values, the annual cost of maintaining a public tree 40 years after its planting costs about 24 bucks a year. You're talking pruning, you might be talking some watering, some mulching. Well, that's cheap at twice the price when you're talking about the benefits that trees provide. The annual benefits, when you quantify them, come up to about $70. You multiply that times 40, the difference between the cost and the benefits, 46 bucks approximately a year, times 40 years, and you have over the life of that tree or maturity of that tree, and you get a value of 1,840 bucks per tree. That may not seem like so much, but when you start to count up the trees, I mean, look outside the window here. How many mature trees do we have here? How much do the citizens, the residents of town and country value the greenery around your homes and on your streets. Intrinsically, yes, dollar value, that kind of stuff is being evaluated too. And some of the ways in which these kinds of healthy people, better business reports, actual quantitative valuations, bases of making these evaluations. For the benefit of folks that are watching this on YouTube, they're going to have to look at the slides too, not just hear what I'm saying, because I'm sorry, I just can't read my slides. That's like reading my weekly reader aloud in the classroom. Bad idea. So costs that have been analyzed by the USDA and the US Forest Service to come up with this kind of data. Tree purchase and planting, pruning, irrigation, pest and disease prevention and control, tree removal and disposal, sidewalk repair, leaf litter cleanup, liability, legal aspects, and administration. Costs analyzed to give us this kind of data. Some of the benefits that have been analyzed. Energy savings in terms of electricity and natural gas. Trees are terrific climate regulators. They are terrific energy efficiency aids. Air pollution reduction, covering carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, airborne particles, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Runoff reduction, rainfall interception, and property values. Now that's a shorter list of benefits, but those are higher dollar figure probably benefits. Benefits. Here's another slide about the value of trees. Healthy communities. Each one of these bullets on these two slides are elements, are benefits that have been economically analyzed and proven as benefits of having trees in communities. Lower levels of domestic violence, reduced stress in body and mind, but lower levels of domestic violence. Trees actually have been shown in scientific and sociological studies to affect those factors in communities where they are present. Block by block, community by community. This is data. This is not supposition, and you're not seeing all the equations behind it, but they exist. Higher property values. Now, okay, large specimen trees can add 3 to 7% to your property value. What's 3 to 7% of $125,000, $150,000? Any math whizzes here? Can you calculate that?
It's 10,000.
Pardon?
Minimum about $4,500.
$4,500. Okay, that may not be very much in dollar figures, but if I were going to look at a house and look for what is on the property, you bet, and of course this is me, I'm Jean Ponzi, I care about this kind of stuff. I would be looking for trees, not flatlands. Okay, energy savings, carefully selected and positioned trees can cut heating and cooling costs for adjacent buildings up to 25%. And there is a movement among electric cooperatives, not so much among investor-owned utilities that I'm aware of, but among electric cooperatives, to take into account the value of trees in energy efficiency and rate evaluation planning, program planning. So this is an example of putting a dollar value on one niche in biodiversity, trees. In St. Louis County, assessment tools are available, and the city of St. Louis became available earlier this spring because of funding from the Missouri Department of Conservation and cooperation with the wonderful nonprofit organization Forest Relief of Missouri. They hired a data development firm out of Boulder, Colorado, to do an urban tree canopy survey of all of St. Louis County and all of the city of St. Louis. And this is what that data looks like. So, for example, the city of St. Louis, you're seeing percent of tree canopy ranging from 0 all the way up to 100, graphically represented within the boundaries of the city of St. Louis. This kind of data is available for every municipality in St. Louis County, and when I went to a training about using this urban tree canopy information in May in Richmond Heights, I was able to look at my ward, the 24th ward in the city of St. Louis, and get down to urban tree canopy data in my ward. It is extraordinarily useful data and information and can be immediately applied to plug into, this is screenshots of a front and back, one-page flyer that we were given a template of at that training. So a local municipality can plug in data from their urban tree canopy survey, their portion of the urban tree canopy survey, and come up with information like up here in the left-hand corner. Percent of existing urban tree canopy relative to the entire area of the municipality. In this case, it's Richmond Heights. Percent of potential planting area, where trees could be added in places that it makes sense. That doesn't mean cover all your parking lots with trees. It means put it in the places where put trees in the places where it makes sense to put them in, where they will have the longest possible life and they will be able to be maintained in the most sensible possible way. And all of that urban tree canopy data will generate, when you plug it into this little template, will generate information that a forester or an urban planner or a public works director or a citizen tree advocate can use to make the case for maintaining and increasing tree cover in your municipality, and make that case on an economic basis. This is a really phenomenal tool. And the next layer of exploration underneath this could be and is funded in many communities by Missouri Conservation Department TRIM grants, which provide small grants for municipalities to actually do tree counts and evaluate the number and the type of trees. This is urban tree canopy, this is cover. Tree counts will tell you how many of what you have and what size they are and basically how are they doing. And for many years, the organization Forest Relief has been engaging another citizen science activity, which is called Tree Keepers, to engage people in municipalities, on blocks, in parts of the community, in evaluating and tracking the health of their trees. So these kinds of measurables and these kinds of communication tools are a really critical part of the toolbox in order to deal with biodiversity and make the case for the value of biodiversity considerations. And this is a brand new thing in St. Louis City and County. Good job, Missouri Department of Conservation. With our tax dollars there, our sales tax dollars, and Forest Relief of Missouri, which is going to celebrate its 20th anniversary in October at the Forest Park Community Center. And I'm very proud to say they asked me to MC that. Maybe I'll get a free tree out of the deal. I would do it even without the tree. So when you think of a more biodiverse St. Louis, what comes to mind?
Well, I'm really excited about the idea of edible forest gardens, right? And then creating food forests that are mimicking natural forests. One of the things that I've looked at is that you talked about here, the tropical forest has such diversity, and that's between species, but individual trees from plant to plant are very genetically uniform. Whereas here in our eastern forest, we have a lot of genetic diversity in this temperate eastern forest, which creates a little bit better resiliency.
Yes.
Right? And so when we look to design an edible forest garden in a neighborhood, an empty lot, or something like that, someone's backyard, and you're bringing in all kinds of different plants that are providing services for each other to create a low a maintenance situation. So it's not like an annual vegetable bed that you have to continually put maintenance into. I mean, I know people that planted these are maybe 5-10 minutes a week, to tend, and then they get a nice edible harvest out of it.
A wealth of information from the discipline of permaculture about using land in a way that minimizes human inputs, maximizes outputs, and minimizes or eliminates environmental degradation. So the concept of an edible forest or a food forest that would be a combination of native and introduced species for maximum productivity at various levels there's an exciting, very wonderful, exciting body of knowledge about that. And I would say a growing number of people who are investigating it and are experimenting with it in the same way that we have a mushrooming number of people keeping chickens in their backyards and becoming hobby beekeepers. Anybody else? Yes.
I played golf for many years at Forest Park, and the fairways have no biodiversity at all, but the roughs didn't used to, and suddenly they do. They've got all kinds of biodiversity in the long grass to either side.
Because in a nutshell, not that I have all the answers here, but in the process of the forest park renovation, which could have been decided upon in, a year, maybe two, by a few people in meetings, but exploded into the most massive level of community and stakeholder engagement. The people that were in charge of that didn't have no idea what they were getting into. But because of the input of the entire community and the input of a diverse community of stakeholders, what came out of the Forest Park Master Plan was not only biodiversification of things like the fairways around the still usable golf course, but several $1 million more in fundraising than they had planned on to support that master plan and begin to establish an endowment to maintain the improvements to Forest Park. That's a pretty telling kind of thing. One more person, what would a more biodiverse St. Louis look like to you?
Fewer
Yes.
lawns.
Oh, go ahead, Dirk. I'll take two more people.
Fewer
Make it
lawns
fast.
and more native plants.
Man, last March, I was this close to getting a goat. We have 3/4 of an acre in the city, and when I had to cut my grass 3 times in March because it was so hot, I was extraordinarily crabby about that. So fewer lawns, yes, more biodiverse opportunities. The program, Bring Conservation Home of the St. Louis Audubon Society, have you heard about that, or have you had Mitch Leachman come and speak about that? Okay, what a tool to engage with homeowners and evaluate individual property and make recommendations for biodiversifying that property and reducing maintenance, reducing watering costs. Wonderful resource in our community. Yes, ma'am.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
So I was going to include a challenge, like, convert 10% of your lawn or something like that.
Out
Metro,
of turf monocrop and into something more biodiverse. Yeah, it's not that hard to do. It doesn't mean you have to plow up the whole place. And,
Right.
it means improve and cultivate your knowledge base and move out of those monocrops. So the overview of the program that we are calling BiodiverseCity St. Louis, Missouri Botanical Garden, having volunteered ourselves sort of at the hub of this community-wide initiative, we called together a summit of stakeholders in May, and we invited all the organizations that we knew of that were engaged to some extent with biodiversity. We invited the choir, the amateurs, the professionals, the hummers. We invited all, not motorized hummers, but that part of the choir, to come and have a conversation about biodiversity and then solicit more input of who is engaged with this. And we are at the point, we sent out a call to action as a response to that stakeholder summit. We sent that out in July, and we are about to start convening some action teams that will deal with these 5 types of action agendas: strategic planning, development, and leadership, public awareness, engagement, and education, research and data gathering. This is the one I'm particularly interested in. I'm turning into dollar dog in my middle age here, is economic and policy opportunities, and then actual action projects that might be invasive species removal, it might be planting process projects, it might be citizen science related projects, it could be any one of these kinds of things. So this is a process that Missouri Botanical Garden has committed to being the hub of for at least a calendar year, including convening the conversation, facilitating the action team's operations, and establishing on our website, mobot.org, a portal for this kind of information. And the list of signatories to that call to action is about 2.5 pages in 11-point type. It's a very impressive. We have such a wealth of resources in this community of organizations that are already engaged with biodiversity. So it's like looking at all those green pockets, all those biodiversity pockets, and stitching them into not only a suit, but a suit and a jacket and a cape and a quilt, and making that available to us all to improve biodiversity factors in our community. Within the Green Business Challenge, this is a program that's been going since 2010. It's an initiative of the St. Louis Regional Chamber, and it has engaged now close to 150 businesses that range from a couple of mom and pops to some of our major corporations, Fortune 500 and Fortune 100, in greening their day-to-day business practices. This year, in the 4th year, the Earthways Center has a contract with the St. Louis Regional Chamber to serve as resource advisors to these companies, and most of that is done by me. I am their coach, which is like, what an opportunity that is. And these businesses are rocking the greening of their day-to-day practices and raising awareness and incorporating sustainability into their values and into the way they do business. It's a really rewarding bunch of stuff to be engaging with. This year, we added a hunk to that Green Business Challenge, to waste minimization and energy efficiency and water conservation, and can you get more people to ride the bus and ride their bikes. We added BBB, Better Business Through Biodiversity, shamelessly co-opting another respected BBB into a tab of the scorecard that all of these companies use to guide their work with greening projects. And I'm not going to ask you to look at all the fine print. This next set of slides here are the components of that Better Business Through Biodiversity scorecard. But basically, there's a lot of educating company personnel. What the heck does biodiversity mean and why is it important to our company? Some of the kinds of things we've been hearing here. Defining and evaluating your land holdings. Looking at maps of your company campus, looking at maps of a 2 to 3 mile radius around your company campus. What does that look like? How could you affect biodiversity in that sphere? Evaluating the features of your physical building. That means the building itself, it means the site, the surroundings. Defining the resources that are part of your company. Do you have birders working there? Do you have anybody who's in Webster Grove's Nature Studies Society? How many people use clotheslines? Do you have gardeners? Do you have master gardeners? Do you have ecologists? Do you have composters? Do you have beekeepers? How can you rally those people's interests? Do you have lepidopterists in your staff to be a part of a biodiversity initiative? Auditing biodiversity factors of your site, and that could be a casual evaluation or it could run all the way up to the kind of program that the St. Louis Academy of Sciences runs every other year, which they call a BioBlitz, which is literally taking people out to count the things and list the things that are in a particular surrounding. BioBlitzes happen every couple of years in Forest Park and Tower Grove Park. There's another one coming up in September in Tower Grove Park. And then developing a case study of what did you do? What did you look at? Why did you look at it? Why is this important to your business? And the last but not least, implementing some kind of a biodiversity action plan. This is when we had the rollout of Better Business Through Biodiversity, launched that at the garden at the end of March, which we strategically timed to happen at the end of the orchid show, so we could lure people to come to this by getting to see the orchid show for free. That's kind of how orchids lure pollinators, you know, mimicking that biological strategy. 21 different companies showed up. And here are some examples of what is happening in these companies now. Just a couple of things. In Chesterfield Valley out by the airport, across Highway 40 from each other is Abengoa Bioenergy, which is a Spanish-owned company. They cultivate sources of biofuels. Across the highway from them is Avianca Engineering, which is a contractor to Abengoa. They help design the engineering processes that develop and disseminate the biofuels. So they're working in these buildings across Highway 40 from each other. Abengoa is right next to that park in Chesterfield where the sculpture of the guy is like coming out of the soil. And on the other side of the highway, Avianca is looking down on a typical sort of a suburban property water holding pond that has a walking trail around it. And both of these companies are looking down from their building at this area with Highway 40 running through it. Saks Properties manages both of their buildings and also manages this property with a holding pond on it. So there is a young woman on the staff of Avianca Engineering who's into permaculture. She wanted to grow a food forest around that pond, but she was willing to kind of step back her planning and expectations, and they have developed a proposal to make to Saks about biodiversifying the perimeter of that pond property so that it becomes a more attractive walking trail and it becomes more attractive habitat for other kinds of creatures. And not incidentally, reduces the habitation of Canada geese, which when you put them around suburban properties become pest species quickly, as wonderful as they are as species in and of themselves. So that's two engineering companies combining their forces, looking down on property across Highway 40 and coming to their property manager and saying, here's what we could do to improve the biodiversity here. That's a pretty cool example, and that just like popped out of nowhere. Here's the other one that I want to share with you. Lambert International Airport. You don't really think of it as a hotbed of biodiversity, right? And in fact, they have to maintain their property. They have two USDA guys on their staff permanently to make sure that the property is maintained so that it doesn't attract bird populations, because birds can fly into jet engines and then people die. So they can't really biodiversify their property in a way that would attract more birds, which is a usual kind of attraction. But what they are doing is they are looking at aquatic biodiversity in a creek that runs under the airport on the south end, which they work very hard at maintaining federal standards, exceed federal standards to keep de-icing chemicals from running off and polluting that creek. They have aquatic biodiversity, and that creek daylights again up on the north end of the airport property. And on the far northwest corner, they have contracted with a beekeeper to install a pretty extensive bee yard. Bees are not going to whack out jet engines. And frankly, they don't usually fly that high anyway. So they are doing what they can, having gotten turned on by all the buzz about hobby beekeeping, and knowing that they can't attract larger kinds of flying life with plant populations, but they can deal at an insect and an aquatic level. And that's the airport. That is some really exciting, creative thinking going on in our business community about biodiversity. Now I'm going to show you, in the last 6 minutes here, I want to show you a few slides of biophilic cities around the world. Anybody know what that term biophilic means and where did it come from? Biophilia, the term was coined by E.O. Wilson, the eminent biologist, who, by the way, is a bug guy. He's an entomologist. He's ants are his particular interest. E.O. Wilson, author of the book Biodiversity, coiner of that, popularizer of that term, eminent scientist. The term biophilia means humans, we have an affinity for the biological world. It's our natural affinity for the biological world. It is a weak tendency among other tendencies within human beings, but it is there. It's something that needs to be learned and needs to be cultivated. And weak tendency, I'm using that in its scientific context, not that we're wimps about this kind of stuff. Okay, so biophilic cities, cities around the world where there are, a selection of them, there are more than this, where there are some really stunning and inspiring examples of incorporating biodiversity. Around the Akerselva River corridor in Oslo, the city of Oslo is in the process of restoring that river corridor, which is acting as a green infrastructure corridor connecting the city of Oslo to all of its surrounding landscape. It forms part of Oslo's plan to daylight and restore all 8 of the rivers that pass through Oslo city center, with programs aimed at reducing traffic and noise pollution, with the introduction of pedestrian and quiet zones to enrich the experience of nature within the city. Now, of course, they have to eat lutefisk, which is cod soaked in lye, but they have other things going on that are nice up there in Norway. 94% of Oslo's inhabitants live within 300 meters of a public green space. And these biophilic measures are clearly working, with 81% of Oslo residents having visited their local forest park in 2012. Okay, so here's another little graphic. I love this when I was working with putting together this sort of little tour of biophilic cities. This is a graphic of the way the Ministry of the Environment looks at urban planning in Oslo. Green space in the middle, water running through, vehicles around the very outside edge, and development integrated within all of that. Here's a good example of restoration. Pilestredet Park in Oslo takes a major university hospital moved out, and the site is being transformed to a green area with dense housing development. The development process is ecologically oriented and includes environmentally friendly use of material and demolition of the old buildings, low energy consumption, plus construction of not one but 2 parks in this dwelling, taking out a university hospital and making it into a very biophilic, very biodiversity-oriented development. In the U.S., Philadelphia has a lot of really outstanding food production biodiversity characteristics being put in their urban farms, and especially the Philadelphia Orchard Project, which created 4 new orchards in 2012 with the ultimate goal of planting 40,000 vacant lots with food-producing trees and crops. Then there's the goal of the city authorities to re-engage the population with the waterfront, which is difficult due to fluctuations of the Delaware River. And yet the Race Street Pier, which was redesigned by James Corner Field Operations, has achieved that connection of the population to the waterfront by biodiversifying this functional pier and making it a pretty doggone nice looking place. The only thing that's missing out there is where's the cafe? I guess it's on the inside there. You have to take your drink out to the end of the pier. That's not so bad. Wellington, New Zealand has a biophilic city team on the city council and is developing a new program called Our Living City, which embraces urban nature connections throughout Wellington. The city currently has over 4,000 hectares of reserve lands within the city limits, including parks and reserves for recreation, wildlife, and scenery. There also are over 60 community conservation groups which participate in planting native species in reserve lands. The Wellington City Council anticipates planting about 1 million native trees within the next 4 years, and between 2010 and 2011, volunteer environmental groups performed over 28,000 hours of service doing this kind of work. Waitangi Park in Wellington is one example of the city's many biophilic features. It's a functioning wetland area that also acts as a popular civic space. It's celebrated for its holistic design, nurturing of ecological habitats, providing effective stormwater management, and creating a strong community center. In Seoul, South Korea, the Cheonggacheon River, how did I do with that? No, that's good. I should have been asking someone from the Philippines, right? We used to work together as master gardener and person who learned from the master gardener back in the not that many years ago. So the Cheonggacheon River runs through downtown Seoul. And the daylighting of this river, which was driven in no small part by the former mayor, Lee Myung-bak, who pushed biophilic measures forward within the city's built environment, daylighting this river through downtown Seoul required the removal of an entire elevated motorway. And actually, this image reminds me of the reverse that is happening in St. Louis, which is putting a lid over the depressed section so that we can get from downtown to the arch grounds. And we still can get depressed down there when we drive through it. We won't be losing anything. The daylighted river assists in urban cooling, biodiversity, and stormwater management. The city of, and it looks like a wonderful place to come down and play and have festivals and things. Satgang Ecology Park is one of several ecological parks in and around the city of Seoul. And Seonyudo Island Park, which is a former industrial sewage plant, has been remediated and repurposed as a haven for wildlife on the banks of the river Hangang. And this reminds me of it. I know you're standing up there, Dirk, but I'm almost done with my tour. This park reminds me of 2 things. It reminds me of sort of the back 40 of the Contemporary Art Museum and the Pulitzer down in the corner of Spring and Washington. And it also reminds me of City Garden, which if you haven't been to City Garden lately, oh my gosh, the plantings down there are phenomenal. That place is so lush plant-wise, and the sculptures are just as good as they always were. In Portland, Oregon, this little urban park, Tanner Springs Park, was an industrial site. There is a local requirement in Portland that all properties and developments manage their own stormwater. Coupled with a City of Portland incentive program that has led to the creation of rain gardens and bioswales throughout the urban fabric, which we have begun in St. Louis through our rainscaping program spearheaded by the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance, which was spearheaded by concerned citizens that roped Missouri Botanical Garden into it, and now we get to be a part of that too. That is a wonderful, this also kind of reminds me of City Garden Tanner Springs Park in Portland, Oregon. In San Francisco, the use of parklets puts green space installations that are temporary and semi-permanent all around the city. There is funding available from the city authorities to encourage communities to participate in the Pavement to Parks program. And San Francisco is also participating in an urban forest plan, evaluating the urban forest and creating a plan to promote the urban forest with a primary focus on street trees, identifying policies and strategies to proactively manage and grow the city's street tree population. The goal is to create an expanded, healthy, and thriving urban forest now and in the future, and a street tree census was conducted in 2012 along with a street tree financing study that is helping inform that. Last but not least, we have the Big Apple, New York, New York, Brooklyn Bridge Park renovated to connect Brooklyn residents with the waterfront. And I had heard about this, but it wasn't until I put this presentation together that I actually saw images of the High Line. Holy malolo. This thing is a 1-mile elevated linear park built on a 1.45-mile section of the former elevated New York Central Railroad called the West Side Line, which runs along the lower west side of Manhattan. The real estate development values have skyrocketed along the High Line, and we are about to get one of these led by Great Rivers Greenway, which is the trestle that is running from the new bridge being constructed over the Mississippi River into St. Louis City and up to the border of North County. We will have one of these soon. And it's our tax dollars at work, that Parks and Soil Sales Tax that funds Great Rivers Greenway, that is enabling them to do that. Very, very cool. Diverse sculpture, places to meet, places to play. Don't leap off the end there. That's the only thing. And of course, Brooklyn Grange, Rooftop Farm, this is the model for farming, not just gardening, but farming scale food production in a metropolitan area. We have one of these going into St. Louis too, thanks to the Rally St. Louis crowdfunding program that gave the nod to the Food Roof, which is a project of Joe and Mary Ostafi are the leads on this. They are both architects. They both work with HOK. They've gotten the go-ahead to use the top of a 2-story building that borders Washington in downtown to create this same kind of urban farming scale on a roof in the St. Louis metro area. So a lot of this kind of stuff is happening here and making people aware of it and knitting together these efforts and helping them work together for more. Well, then there's Central Park too. And we have Forest Park. And that's really good. We talked about that in the golf course. So within St. Louis, more cohesiveness, better understanding, better support, better cooperation for biodiversity and the way it looks around our city, within our small lots, within our backyards, along our parking lots, along our highways, next to our buildings, tiny little walkways, in food production areas, some of which you can see and enjoy, and some of which is down there in the brown, where 97% of the biodiversity on Earth is found in soil. It is a really wonderful body of information to be engaged with. And when I walked up here to Longview Farm Park and saw all the native plantings and knew that I was coming into, you know, I grew up in suburban Milwaukee, and you don't necessarily always think of suburbia as the greenest bulb in the array. And yet, here's the Town and Country Green Team hosting all of these topics. My dear friend Jamie Kelly from the Green Dining Alliance, the backyard chicken topic that you had. How many of you have clotheslines now? Except we just cut down 2 of the 3 trees in my backyard that supported my clothesline. There's an ailanthus and a crummy box elder, so now I have to come up with another clothesline. This is progress. Seeing our community differently, yes, keeping in mind the human boundaries, the geographic boundaries, the political, the economic boundaries, but also having an understanding of the biodiversity, of the biologic boundaries that link us. We are here at the confluence of the 4th largest watershed in the world. We have a lot of opportunity, we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of riches, we have a lot of partnerships, and Missouri Botanical Garden is very, very pleased to be a part of that and doing our part to move the wheel forward at the hub of it for the time that we do that. Thank you. That's not bad, 7 minutes. You took up at least 4.
If you'd like to learn more about beekeeping, permaculture, bring nature home, forest relief, those are all green speaker talks available on YouTube. And we also had a chicken speaker, but that was before we started taking the video. Are we so grateful that Gene Ponzi came and spoke to us tonight? I'm sure they know. I'm sure she'll answer your questions, and before you go, please take some of the swag. So, hope to see you next month and October 3rd. Mark that on your calendar, please.
Any questions? Yes, thank you.
We were in Sweden this summer and in Stockholm, which I just had no idea what to imagine. But the most surprising thing was within the city, we were taking a walk and came upon not garden plots, garden little farms within the city, and they would be fenced, and they were so individualized. They were each allowed to have not just a little shack, but a little house big enough. Maybe they'd go spend Sunday afternoon there or anything, and they were all growing, whether it be flowers or garden. It was beautiful, and it just rolled on and on throughout the city. Could you imagine something like that on how many of our empty plots?
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we have a leg up on that already because we have in our organization, Gateway Greening, our community gardening organization, we have a few decades of the process of building community through gardens, building relationships between humans, building healthy food production, and grounding those gardens around our community. The changes in things like planning and zoning. So when a lot that was vacant that became a community garden all of a sudden becomes a place where you might want to put a new restaurant, safeguarding that kind of property and having the development take place somewhere else. Like let's redevelop the old shoe leather factory that's up the road there instead of putting the restaurant on. That's a kind of thinking that is a shift that is beginning to happen, that is beginning to get in planners' ideas. And the prospect of having farming, urban farming, already taking place in places like City Seeds, urban farm. Off of Jefferson, just east of Market, this long strip of gardening that's right where the Chestnut Street exit comes off of Highway 40, between whatever the hotel is there and that exit, that it's down in the exit ramp. That urban farm has been going now for maybe not as many as 10 years, 5 years, 6 years. And it's teaching food production skills and life skills and providing a healing opportunity for people that are coming through St. Patrick's Center, which is a social service agency, working with veterans, working with people with chemical dependencies and mental illnesses, and also working with people that just need a job and are getting jobs then in the greens industry through that kind of thing. I just think we can't have too much of that. And we have a lot of it already going on here.
Well, I took lots of pictures of
Great,
it. So
that's great. Yes.
In the fourth minute of your talk, you're talking about soil, and you have a guest on your show. You just said she wrote a book. What was the
Her
name
name
of
is
the book?
Joanna Schwartz, or Joanne Schwartz, and the name of the book is Cows Save the Planet. It came out earlier this year, and I believe it was Chelsea Green Publishing, but it could have been somebody else. Cows Save-
C-O-W-S, cows?
Pardon?
C-O-W-S, cows?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, very readable. She's a wonderful journalist, and her vita of where she has published runs the gamut from Atlantic Monthly to Cosmopolitan to the New Yorker, and she got interested in climate change issues, and it kind of led her to cows and to soil management. And a lot of what she's writing about is the interconnection of grazing methods. I forget what the term is that she uses for those grazing methods, but grazing methods and restoring soils.
Managed something.
Something, yeah, something, yep, something managed something, yes.
Just maybe a comment from your presentation. Usually biodiversity seems to just say, oh, we need more plants or just more other organisms, but there's so much sense of the human element in what you're talking about that seems to help connect it better.
Very much so.
Right.
Very much
Because
so.
that's what, I mean, my sense is that I see a lot of, like, people go and plant native plants and go, yeah, we're doing something for the environment and the bees are going to be all happy. But where's my connection to my food, my shelter, my fiber, my pharmaceuticals, you know, all those pieces that help me connect to why nature is important. And that's that, you brought up that weak connection of biophilia, which is like that. I can walk outside and have a recreational experience and even get some sense of enjoyment, but I'm not getting as connected as I would if I go out and eat and get what I need to meet my own needs out of it.
Right. And there's a cultural diversity factor in that too. I mean, when you think about it, diversity in the workplace, diversity in society is a fairly new, it's a relatively new consideration that had to be legislated to some extent in our society, but also then just became a level of awareness. Ameren is getting ready to have their first diversity fair for their employees on the first Saturday in October, and they're expecting 3,000 attendees of employees and their families. And they're bringing together international dancers and different kinds of food and different kinds of groups in the same way that the International Institute has brought together representatives of the different kinds of cultures and nationalities that make up the St. Louis area in their Folk Fest and the Festival of Nations over the years. I remember when there were a lot of, I want to say it was a lot of Thai immigrants coming into Benton Park. I lived in Benton Park in the 1980s and into the 90s. And there was a little influx of people from Thailand, immigrants from Thailand, coming through the International Institute. And the gardening practices were like, we'll here, and we'll here, and we'll here, and the pollinators would fly between them, and it wasn't like rows, and it wasn't a box. It was a really different kind of gardening practice that cultivated the different foodstuffs that went into Thai food, Thai cooking. And it was kind of a revelation to me to look at how another culture dealt with growing plants, like the Native American concept of the three sisters, of planting beans and corn and squash together. The corn grows really tall, and the beans climb up the corn, and the squash shades everything so it can all flourish. And you have the beans early, and the corn next, and the squash later, and the nutrients that come from those plants and come from the unedible parts of those plants getting sent back into the soil, all combine to make healthy soil. It's that kind of cultural knowledge is a part of biodiversity too, and I love that element of it.
I just have a question about, I didn't realize, I can't remember what you just said about we're the fourth largest something.
Fourth largest watershed in the world.
I didn't know that.
The Mississippi River watershed.
So what's happening with like the river repair? Is it ever going to be beautiful again? Like, you know, I mean, I cringe at that concrete, you know, I want to see a beautiful river repair again. Do you know what's happening?
You know, I'm from Kansas City, and Kansas City had Brush Creek, and there was a plaza flood back in the late 70s, and it was congregating like that for a long time. And they brought the level down and had planted a lot of plants on and created a walkway along, and now they have this, like, in October they have a fire festival thing where they have these flotation things and people doing fire, and it's fantastic. So it would be great.
Do you know if anything is underway to
Well, in terms of the funding to support that kind of thing, the big funding stream has come through, they're called the 319 grants, and it's Part 319 of the Clean Water Act. I forget what the rest of it is. It comes through EPA to the states. In our state, it's the Department of Natural Resources that oversees water quality. So 319 grants were what gave the start to the River to Pear Watershed Alliance that founded the process, the body of knowledge that the Missouri Botanical Garden calls rainscaping, which wasn't in this presentation, but which you can see on our website, and that has brought MSD money to communities in the River to Pear watershed, which touches parts of either 13 or 16 communities, to offer rainscaping rebates to homeowners and commercial property owners to implement some of these rainscaping measures, plant-based solutions for stormwater remediation. 319 grants, originally when they first started to be made, they were supposed to go to bodies of water that could be remediated to the point where they could be swimmable and fishable. And River to Pear was so far gone, they were like so far down the list, nobody was ever going to look at River to Pear. So the regulatory and the funding mechanisms that are in place and that are addressing the remediation and the protection of bodies of water like Deer Creek and its tributaries, and have resulted in the first incentives coming from our Metropolitan Sewer District to help property owners implement these kinds of green infrastructure solutions. I'm hopeful that as, I'm always optimistic about this kind of stuff, that at some point we will get funding sources that will look at remediating a body of water like Brush Creek or like River to Pear that are so far degraded where you'd have to really take out all that concrete and you'd have to rebuild the banks and restabilize and repopulate with plants and all those kind of stuff. Maybe I can tell you that when River to Pear gets out to the Mississippi River, I've seen it. It's a river again. And on St. Louis Earth Day barge trips, we used to be able to take barge trips every year as part of Earth Day, and I hope they will resuscitate that. The Army Corps of Engineers would provide the barge and the tow, and you'd be out there for a whole day. You couldn't get off it. You couldn't leave and go to a meeting. And have this whole day on the Mississippi River, going upstream one year, downstream one year. The first year we went past the mouth of the River to Pear, and I saw that it was a river again. I cried.
I know.
That's my watershed. And that little stinky little concrete stream gets to be a river again before it gets to be in the Mississippi and dumps all that poop in the Mississippi. So hold that hope.
Okay, all right.
Anyone else?
I just have a question. On the study of the canopy overlap, have they ever done another overlay overhead map that looking at property values, violent crimes, things of that nature? That seems to be a very strong motivator, especially in the recent news, politically wise, to motivate aldermen, chairman,
That-
organizers. Hey, we keep violence off the streets, we start planting trees, people are happier, they get along better, property values increase, no longer have these terribly distressed neighborhoods.
That urban tree canopy data just came here in May, so there haven't been any overlays to it. But in other parts of the country where that kind of data has been generated, that's where it came from, through the USDA and the U.S. Forest Service. And that kind of data. East-West Gateway Council of Governments has a library of mapping resources that is phenomenal, that they were able to make, including different ecosystem types and different factors of ecological health and degradation and maintenance and blah, 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 in this massive volume of digital maps that they have, that East-West Gateway got by partnering with emergency management agencies in the St. Louis area that have to do aerial surveys every however many years it is to update emergency management data resources. East-West Gateway has extrapolated from that and will make that available to planning agencies and to an effort like this. So it hasn't happened here yet, but the data came probably when that kind of data was developed. It came from some kind of partnership like the one you described.
Right, because easily you look at the map and you can see pretty clear correlation between the two.
Yep, you bet. Yes.
Have you guys talked about having an investor program or something where you train individuals in the community, then they can help deliver this message to churches, schools, neighborhoods, stuff like that, and coordinate, create projects that are very local on along, take your PowerPoint and shrink it down into pictures.
Not yet, because the BiodiverseCity St. Louis initiative is so new. It just really got launched this spring. But if the Town and Country Green Team Commission, did I get that right? Would like to become signatory to this initiative, BiodiverseCity St. Louis, and get involved in one of those 5 action areas, that could be something that could originate from your community, or there may be people in this community that would want to, just suggesting the idea within the context of this kind of broader initiative, and the communication system that will work within BiodiverseCity St. Louis is not yet built, not yet functioning. But that is a really, really good example, in the same way that we have master gardeners and master naturalists and master composters and things like that. Yes, that is a great idea. You want to do that, don't you? Thank you so much.